You can watch a free video excerpt from the second subscription level and continue watching other exclusive videos at a 50% discount on my Boosty. Enjoy watching. Description: he was certain he would never fall in love. How could someone who had become a murderous tool for the government be capable of love? But even so, a bright flash of light bursts into his life. She is the one who illuminates his darkness, the one who shines brighter than the sun. And only his inner demons whisper that he is unworthy of her, that she is not for him. So will she be able to kindle a flame in his soul and heart, or will it remain just a brief flash? Chapter 4. Naruto and Sakura walked side by side the entire way to the village, quietly conversing and giggling occasionally. Sasuke rolled his eyes and expressed his reaction to the situation with his laconic, meaningful, and therefore incomprehensible Kakashi tried to collect his thoughts, to keep nothing from revealing how the mission had affected him. The way he looked at his sensei's daughter, how terrified he was for her, and how he wanted such situations to never happen again. The girl herself seemed to have forgotten everything. Naruto walked with a wide smile on her face, and not a single muscle in her body showed any tension that might indicate what she'd been through. Yes, she had ultimately gotten rid of the official, successfully completing the mission, and he hadn't been able to lay a finger on her, but the very fact that it could have happened, hadn't that left some trace? Kakashi quickened his pace slightly to catch up with the girls walking slightly ahead of him and have a chance to talk to Naruto alone. Sakura had always been good at recognizing when it was time to leave people alone, so this wouldn't have been a problem, but right now the girls were too busy discussing strictly girly topics. Is he really such a romantic? Naruto raised an eyebrow skeptically, not caring at all that the male half of their team could hear their conversation. It's hard to believe, isn't it? Sakura giggled awkwardly, blushing a little. But yeah, sometimes he does something so sweet it leaves me speechless. I don't believe it, Namikaze Uzumaki stated decisively. This is the topic. He loves tomatoes and working out, and you say that that he cooks you dinner when you have a chance to be alone? That he gives you flowers? Naruto, you're just impossible sometimes, you know that? Sakura laughed, looking at her friend's stunned face. Yes, but still. Are we sure we're talking about the same person? Haruno only laughed even louder in response, and then, wiping away the tears that had formed in the corners of her eyes, asked a counter question. What about your beloved? Naruto instantly became embarrassed, and even looked sadly at the forest that surrounded their road. No way, the blonde shrugged, as if it didn't matter. Only her gaze became a little sad and lonely. I'm not sure he even notices me. Are you serious right now? Sakura screamed, to which Naruto immediately covered her mouth with his hand. Quiet down, the Jinchuriki hissed. Have you seen yourself in the mirror? I have no idea where you dug up such a figure, maybe you're constantly underhenge, but you look amazing, Naruto. I doubt there's a single guy in Konoha who hasn't noticed you. Kakashi couldn't argue with that. He'd seen boys and men stop dead in their tracks more than once when Naruto strolled through the village in some dress Kushina had given her. She was a real eye-catcher, so Haruno's words were absolutely true. It's unlikely that there was anyone in the Leaf who didn't notice Naruto. Maybe, but he doesn't see me as a girl, I'm sure of it, Namikaze Uzumaki sighed heavily. Then he's a complete idiot, Sakura stated decisively, crossing her arms over her chest and frowning in displeasure. Let him go to hell in that case. And you could go on a date with someone, maybe you could take your mind off him. And with whom? Naruto said mockingly. With Kiba, for example, Haruno said as if nothing had happened. Or with Niji. They both have their eyes on you. But not with Lee. It took Kakashi a moment to realize that the grinding of teeth he heard was his own. He briefly imagined what it would be like if he saw Naruto with one of those guys, and the rage, uncontrollable, all-consuming rage enveloped him too quickly. And only the words of the very culprit of what was happening to him broke the ice of his anger. Oh, Kami! Sakura, no, no, and no again. They're like. I've known them since childhood, they're like brothers to me, so no way. Like brothers. And he was included in that category? He probably even ranked first. It's no wonder he remained her NII-san even after several years. And this, perhaps, was the first time that his heart was so deeply pierced. Okay. Sakura took pity, raising her hands up as if she was giving in to this argument. If I understand you correctly, then you don't need other guys at all and only that one matters, right? But he doesn't see you as a girl. Having received 2 nods in a row, Haruno continued. So here is my question: why do you think he's not interested in you? Kakashi's ears were completely focused. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed that Sasuke had clearly been observing his strange behavior for some time now, but he remained silent, allowing his sensei to follow the girls and eavesdrop on their conversation. The youngest of the main Uchiha clan might be a complete asshole at times, as Naruto often reminded him, but he could also display a certain amount of good manners on occasion. Well, let's start with the fact that I'm younger than him, Namikaze Uzumaki stated the first fact with a heavy heart, as if she hoped that Haruno's interrogation would end there. Oh, the pink-haired girl drawled slyly, grinning slightly. Who would have thought that you prefer older men here? And is there much of a difference? Yes, Naruto nodded resignedly. More than 10 years. Kakashi swallowed nervously, but Sakura even whistled in surprise. Apparently, she was expecting to hear the figure of 5 years, but here. Kakashi himself tried to remember everyone who fit these age criteria, and almost groaned in despair. The list was impressive. And considering she hadn't said exactly how much older her lover was, his heart ached as such a commonplace word surfaced in his thoughts. She already had someone she loved, and she didn't want anyone else, she'd said so herself. So, here's a tricky question. Has this perversion been with you for a long time now, or since your journey with Jiraiya? Sakura giggled, but immediately fell silent. The friend looked devastated. Oh, I'm sorry, yes, it's normal. Considering who exactly my teacher is, it's not even surprising, Naruto shrugged, looking away. And I've liked him for a long time. Even before I met my godfather in person, and not through letters and stories from my parents. Sakura was silent for a while, and then began asking questions again. If I understand you correctly, then who exactly is this guy? You won't tell me until you're at least a little sure that he reciprocates your feelings? Having received an affirmative nod, Haruno continued. But can you tell us something about him? Well, his personality, his habits, his appearance. Maybe we can come up with a plan to win him over? Well, Naruto began hesitantly, shrugging awkwardly. You can try, so? Sakura hurried, clearly pleased that she would be able to find out at least something. He is very caring. I have known him for as long as I have known him. He always thinks of others first, and only then of himself. He's a little strange. He's not particularly picky when it comes to food, he eats everything, and I don't even know what his favorite dish is. He reads a lot. A lot, to be honest. And his appearance. Naruto blushed rapidly and bit her lip, immediately falling silent. Oh, come on! Smiling contentedly, as if they had come to the most interesting part, although it was quite possible that this was the case from a woman's point of view, Sakura hurried her friend. Go on. Of course, your loved one will always be the best in your eyes, but try to be objective. He is really handsome, Naruto muttered embarrassedly. And I'm objective. Anyone who saw it can confirm this. Wow! Are you a sucker for handsome guys? Playfully pushing her friend in the shoulder, Haruno played with her eyebrows. Oh, come on! Naruto smiled a little relieved. I didn't know what he looked like for a very long time, so looks are definitely not an indicator for me. Kakashi tensed. She hadn't known what he looked like for a long time, but she liked him? What did that mean? Haruno immediately voiced the same question. The blonde sighed heavily. Handsome, strong, caring, well-read. Sakura looked meaningfully at her friend. Where did you dig up this? In Konoha, of course. Namikaze Uzumaki laughed. Okay, but you've given me general concepts. Now tell me. Is there something that particularly attracts you to him? Something that really sets him apart from everyone else? A scar or a birthmark? Kakashi's ears tightened. If she could name some remarkable trait by which he could determine who exactly her chosen one was, he would be convinced of his worthiness for Naruto. Despite all the virtues she'd described, Kakashi still wasn't convinced that the right guy would be worthy of her, no matter how dear he was to her. But what if he was truly good? His heart sank and ached. He'd have to accept this. He'd have to accept that Naruto had chosen her lover, and he'd be alone again. Hatake chuckled silently. What did he mean again? As if he'd already been with Naruto, and she'd suddenly found someone else. It's just that he won't be as important to her anymore. He's not as important as he used to be, he just didn't know it then. So, okay, but this will stay between us. Naruto muttered a little embarrassedly, lowering her voice and leaning slightly towards the pink-haired girl's shoulder. He has a birthmark, and all I can think of when I think of his face is that I would like to kiss it. Namikaze Uzumaki blushed as brightly as a poppy the moment the last words left her lips. Sakura, however, stared at Naruto in shock and didn't even attempt a sly smile. However, her confusion passed quickly enough that after a moment, she whispered contentedly in response, "It wasn't for nothing that you traveled in the company of your godfather." And not giving Naruto a chance to complain, Sakura continued, "And what kind of birthmark is this?" Naruto smiled awkwardly and did something that made Kakashi's heart skip a beat and his breath catch in his lungs. She pointed to her face, where her chosen one's birthmark should be. Her finger stopped just below the left side of his lips. Exactly where Kakashi's own birthmark was. It seemed like his brain stopped working the same moment Naruto did. Continued right here. I saw his face only once, but I remember this detail well. And I haven't been able to forget it since. His brain was malfunctioning, refusing to process the information or think. This couldn't be true, right? He'd never had such luck in his life, so where to begin now? Or maybe she wasn't talking about him after all? But no one else in the Umbu had such a remarkable detail. However, a sapling of hope had already begun to take root, taking hold in his heart with little things he hadn't noticed before. Of course, it could all be far-fetched, but he desperately wanted to believe that Naruto was in love with him. More than 10 years older than her, yes, he is. He is caring and always thinks of others first. Also there, especially after he almost lost Obito on the Canopy Bridge. A bit weird and well-read. This is most likely a general thing, and it was meant to refer to his passion for the Ika Ika series, so, also there. He's not really picky about food, but if I hint that he still prefers tempura, will she take that into account? As for beauty, Kakashi pursed his lips. He couldn't put a price on his own looks, but his friends always called him handsome. Did that apply? But the most important thing, he had this damned birthmark that Naruto pointed out and which she... Oh. Kakashi only now connected everything together, and now almost tripped over nothing from the realization of what had been said. She wanted to kiss that birthmark. She wanted to kiss his birthmark. On his face. She wanted kiss his? His brain stopped working again. Hatake unconsciously quickened his pace, which brought him right up to the girls, who finally noticed him. Sakura smiled sweetly, as she always did, and quickly vacated her place next to the Jinchuriki, leaving Kakashi alone with Naruto while she approached her boyfriend. She silently looked at his frowning, thoughtful face and sighed heavily. "I'm perfectly fine." Approaching him a little closer, Namikaze Uzumaki immediately said, anticipating the question. "How can you even be okay if you believe I don't love you? But that's definitely not what we're talking about now. Are you sure? Even more experienced shinobi don't take it so lightly." Naruto paused, looking ahead at the road. Biting her lip, which immediately caught Hataki's attention, she mumbled something unintelligible, then exhaled resignedly. "You're right. I'm not okay," the blonde admitted, looking away, as if she was confessing to something shameful. I'm glad everything went well. I knew the potential risks, but when I drank that crap he offered me, Kakashi, for the first 10 seconds I felt the effects of the drug. I felt my body stop listening to me, as if there was a separate physical shell and a separate consciousness. It was as if I was seeing everything from the outside. How my hands suddenly froze, how my legs stopped supporting my entire body. For 10 seconds, I became a puppet, Kakashi. I've never panicked like this before, because I've never been in such situations, but then, standing in front of him, waiting for Kurama to flush out all the poison, I was so scared for the first time. I even thought that nothing would work, that he. Naruto sucked in a sharp breath. Her breath caught, and she suddenly looked at Hatake with fear, as if everything that hadn't happened yesterday had finally happened. He reacted more intuitively than logically, simply pulling the slightly trembling girl toward him and hugging her. Sakura and Sasuke, standing behind her, froze for a split second, then nodded and immediately hurried past their commander and teammate. There was no need to explain the reason for this behavior. It was all perfectly clear. I wouldn't let that happen, Naruto. He allowed the anger that had settled in him since last night to break through into his voice. But you know, Kakashi, Naruto suddenly said in a flat, low voice. She always spoke like that only in moments of blinding rage. He remembered that. If it had been another girl in my place, any other kunoichi, whether from our village or not, she wouldn't have been able to handle it. I know that. And knowing he'd done this with other girls before, it makes me, I understand, Hatake nodded, hugging Naruto tighter. And I feel the same. You were truly perfect for this role, that's why the Hokage entrusted it to you, but others couldn't have done half of what you did. You're amazing and a great woman. Namikaze Uzumaki buried her face in his vest, but he noticed her blush. The realization that she might like him, and that she was embarrassed by his compliments, made his heart beat a little faster, which the girl in his arms must have heard. Holding her in my arms was not just pleasant, excellent. And if it weren't for this mission, he would have allowed himself to stand there with her for a little while longer, but Sasuke and Sakura, looming on the horizon, hadn't disappeared, but had slowed down and were clearly waiting for the rest of the team to catch up. So, no matter how much he wanted to stay like this, propriety and the uncertainty of the situation prevented him from doing so. With an effort that was invisible to the naked eye, Kakashi gently pulled away from the girl, who smiled a little shyly and tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. Sorry, I'm usually not so impressionable in such matters, Namikaze Uzumaki chuckled nervously. What does, in such matters, mean? Hatake asked, puzzled, narrowing his eyes. Had she been in similar situations with all sorts of maniacs and rapists before? And he knew about it. Interesting. Well, it's not the first time I've played the role of a worthless girl who can't do anything to become a target. Naruto blinked in surprise, as if she was explaining the obvious. And when is this? Kakashi cut himself off mid-sentence. Maybe not all the time, maybe unconsciously, but yes. Naruto often acted as bait on missions. The skinny girl created the necessary illusion that the entire team was worthless, until that same girl eventually blew everyone away with her shadow clones and clan jutsu. Hatake let out a resigned sigh, causing Naruto to smirk. The man clearly remembered everything and understood what she meant, so there was no point in explaining the obvious now. In the end, she simply took his hand, as she had done many times before, and gently pulled him along with her. Come on, let's get back home quickly, Naruto smiled and looked at the road. And Sakura and Sasuke are probably already waiting for us. Kakashi nodded and let her lead the way. The soft touch of her palm was felt even through his glove, but he made a mental note. On missions and in situations where he might easily walk side by side with Naruto, he should remove his gloves beforehand. Just in case. After all, the sensation of skin against skin would certainly be much more pleasant. Chapter 5. Kushina hummed while the kettle boiled and she took a freshly baked pie out of the oven. She waltzed deftly and skillfully around the kitchen, rearranging cutlery, and then, with smooth, dance-like movements, walked into the dining room to set out plates and cups. The woman was so peaceful that Kakashi wanted to slam his head against the nearest wall, because what he wanted to talk about with Kushina would definitely ruin her mood. First talked to her, then to Minato-sensei. He wanted to ask permission to court their daughter, and he knew for sure that he would most likely be refused. But even that thought was calmer than if he started pursuing Naruto's attention. They met secretly, and only then did her parents find out. They would probably be furious and disappointed. And both of those emotions were killing Kakashi, even though he hadn't even done anything yet. Minato will be here soon, so the three of us will have lunch. Kushina stunned him with the news, looking at the wall clock. And Naruto? Kakashi asked, trying sincerely not to let his voice waver when he heard her name. You won't have to wait for her until evening. Since she returned, she's been trying to help everyone in need in our village at least once a week instead of Obito. Kushina replied cheerfully and carefree, smiling contentedly and clearly proud of her daughter. Well, that explained a lot. Not everything, but her frequent disappearances and the busyness she periodically referred to now became more understandable. However, that didn't change the fact that he wasn't prepared to talk to both parents of the girl who occupied his thoughts. And, as if sensing these cowardly thoughts, the door to the house opened and Sensei's tired but rather joyful voice came from the hallway. I'm home. Welcome back. Kushina responded happily, quickly removing her apron and rushing to greet her lover. Hatake sometimes wondered how his wife would greet him if he ever decided to tie the knot. This was before Naruto's return, when he firmly believed that he would forever remain a confirmed bachelor and certainly would never find a girl he loved enough to dream about her day and night. Back then, he completely didn't understand Minato-sensei. In love with how old was he? 10? Early age only, and Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze remained faithful to her all these years and always had eyes only for her. No matter how desperately other women tried to attract him, no matter what they did, he was adamant. Not a single beautiful woman would ever merit his gaze unless it was strictly necessary. So what now? Kakashi wanted to slap his earlier self for always snorting contemptuously at Minato-sensei's pronouncements, that one day a woman would appear in his life whom he wouldn't want to get rid of for all the treasures in the world. Back then, he truly believed that would be the case. No serious relationships with girls, because they, a major source of headaches, but certainly no cause for joy. A couple of good nights spent together are unlikely to correct the scandalous nature of all female representatives. Kakashi! Good to see you! Entering the dining room, the blond man immediately greeted Hatake, hugging his contented wife around the waist and directing her to the table, clearly wanting her to rest and not continue to fuss around him and the guest. Hokage-sama, Kakashi bowed politely, swallowing nervously. He had to do this. Today. We're not in my office, so we can just do it the old-fashioned way. Sensei. Minato smiled softly, but Kakashi knew very well the man behind that mask. The same one who could personally defeat 1,000 enemy shinobi with just one movement jutsu. Oh, maybe he shouldn't have rushed it. Minato-sensei was truly a scary man when he was angry. Mentally kicking himself for such pathetic thoughts, Hatake nodded at his mentor's remark and firmly decided to wait until after lunch to discuss the matter. The hungry Hokage. An angry Hokage. But he still didn't want to see an angry Namikaze. Or rather, an even angrier one. Kushina looked at the copy ninja carefully, even demandingly, and then smiled faintly. To others, Kakashi might look the same as always, but she knew him too well, and so one glance at him was enough for her to understand. He was nervous as hell. And she knew exactly why. And how long ago, Kakashi? Uzumaki asked point-blank, loading her wife with rice into a deep bowl. Hatake twitched slightly and turned his intense gaze to Kushina. What exactly? The silver-haired man immediately reacted. How long have you liked Naruto? Minato sighed heavily next to him, his shoulders slumped and his eyes fixed on his food. Kushina barely restrained herself from giggling. Kakashi panicked and stood frozen like a stone statue, looking fearfully at Minato, while the latter was too hungry, not annoyed, to even look at his student. Oh, the younger man clearly thought he wasn't being looked at because of his barely contained rage. It was almost amusing. His usual eloquence and sober, cool mind failed him, unwilling to help him get out of the situation. It seemed to him that a storm was about to break out, right in this house and at this table. Only the teacher's voice didn't sound cold and distant, as it did in moments of greatest tension, but calm. Don't let yourself be fooled. A treacherous thought began to beat in his head, demanding that he remain on guard and, if necessary, run away. Kakashi, it was more than obvious, Kushina said tiredly. Even when I recently decided to ask you if you liked someone, I already knew the answer. Did you know? Hakata asked again in a strangled voice, glancing sideways at the teacher again. Kakashi, you haven't taken your eyes off her since she came back. You were furious when you filed the mission report where Naruto was the potential victim. And even before that. Did you even notice that half of your questions while Naruto was gone were about her? Minato stared straight ahead, somewhat resignedly, as if he'd long since resigned himself to everything, though it hadn't been easy. Swallowing nervously, the silver-haired man looked away, trying to calm down a bit. Was he really that predictable? Was he that easy to read? And was he really constantly asking about her? If so, did his obsession with this girl begin even earlier? He probably wasn't already in love with her, but he was interested in her? Intrigued? What was that even? I don't think you were already in love with her when you were younger, Kushina said thoughtfully, tapping her chopsticks on her chin and as if answering his questions. You probably cared for her like a younger sister or even a ward back then. But even then, you wouldn't let anyone get close to you. Did you even notice that you drove away absolutely every boy who even looked at her? I think even Minato so thoroughly not protected Naruto. Kakashi felt like he was dreaming. They weren't against him? Or what? What was the point of this conversation? Had he really always been so possessive? Come to think of it, he really did try to keep boys away from Naruto, even though back then he'd firmly believed she was simply too young to even begin a relationship. The Kazakage's eldest son, Kankuro, Niji Hyuga, Kiba Inuzuka and even Shino Aburame did try to court her a couple of times, but she was 12 years old. Kunoichi, of course, mature faster than civilian girls, but not that much. His clan was always characterized by a special attachment to people they allowed close to them. Such individuals were always very rare, because letting them go later was especially painful. He had a hard time coping with his father's death, and it was even harder to accept his teacher, and then Obito and Rin. With Kushina, it was both easier and even more difficult. She left him no choice. She presented him with the fact that this was her. She would stay like this and would forever be in his life, whether he wanted it or not. It was easy to come to terms with her. It was hard to let her in. And then Naruto appeared, who was part of his new family, and therefore the easiest to accept. He became attached to her more than anyone else because he had known her from the very beginning, accepted her, participated in her development, became her sensei and helped her develop. It was just. At what point did everything become so complicated? When did he start to fear losing her? After all, he knew from the very beginning that sooner or later she would find someone who would become her lover, her boyfriend, her husband. Was his attachment really so strong that he started turning away all potential suitors even in her teens? He had never been so possessive. He always assessed everything soberly and accepted everything, guided mostly by logical considerations. But apparently not with her. And the worst part was, her parents had long suspected and seen all this, and weren't even against it. However, this was perhaps for the best. And she needed to be convinced of it. So, do you mind if I take care of Naruto? Kakashi decided to clarify in a hoarse voice. No, Minato shook his head, still tired and resigned to everything. He didn't look too upset, more like satisfied? Calm? But definitely not happy. Kakashi hadn't even counted on that. I just advise you to talk to her before tomorrow evening, Kushina quickly interjected, taking a sip of water from a glass and trying not to look at anyone. Why? Hataki hastened to inquire. What was it they said? Strike while the iron is hot? It seems like Kiba asked her out on a date, slipping out from behind the table, Uzumaki dropped a bomb on the men and disappeared into the kitchen. What? Minato and Kakashi asked in unison. Only the former's voice was like a growl, while the latter's was filled with indignation. Oh, so this is how angry Minato-sensei gets. A shameful, frightened thought flashed through his mind as the silver-haired man shifted his gaze from the doorway through which Kushina had disappeared to the teacher. The blond man was practically darting lightning bolts. His gaze promised instant reprisal, his voice grew cold and distant, and his fingers gripped the wooden chopsticks so tightly that they creaked and cracked pitifully. It seemed as if even the air in the room had grown thicker. What the hell? Namikaze asked, breathing heavily, looking at his wife who had entered the dining room. He's been eyeing her for a long time, you know that. Very indifferently, for such a situation, Kushina answered, putting the pie on the table and starting to clear away unnecessary dishes and plates. He's a petty womanizer. He's already dated half the girls his age, he's shamelessly flirting with the other half, and he's even eyeing some of the older kunoichi. Immediately began to list the Hokage's shortcomings. So he's also an Inuzuka dog lover. And Tsum is such a bitch. Don't swear at the table. Kushina barked, driving the knife into the wooden surface with a crash. I'm against it. Was a little embarrassed by the angry gaze of Namikaze's wife. That's why I told Kakashi to hurry up. Uzumaki snapped, angrily placing her hands on her hips and completely forgetting about the guest. Oh, so he really did get the go-ahead. Otherwise, the anger at him would be much stronger, right? He has even more disadvantages. He's older than her. That's one thing. I worked in Umbu. 2. In the book, Bingo is rated as Class A, which doesn't really add any advantages to it, so 3. And he's actually a dog person too, if it comes down to it. Inuzuka only runs around with Akamaru, and he has a whole pack. I'm against it even with that condition. Inuzuka is a joker. And although he already has the rank of senior chunin, he's practically a jounin. He'll never be able to protect Naruto properly. So, by the way, Kakashi, Minato suddenly turned sharply to his former student, causing him to flinch. Just try getting hurt on a mission now. If Naruto worries about you, I'll personally skin you alive. Kakashi nodded quickly. He's a dead man if he doesn't listen to his Hokage. He's definitely not going to live. Okay. Stop it immediately. Kushina's voice rose several tones. I won't tolerate any other son-in-law than Kakashi, so stop bullying him. And Naruto will figure it out herself if he doesn't act stupid, right? Now 2 pairs of eyes were fixed on him, evoking only one desire. Nod and assure them that he'd do absolutely anything. Even if they asked him to do something out of the ordinary or swear to anything. Damn it, this pair scared him more than the swordsman of the mist. See? Kushina pointed her hand expressively in his direction, turning to her husband, who nodded with a dissatisfied look, but his eyes still showed Kiba's disapproval, even if he didn't date Naruto, which Kakashi would definitely arrange. Then I'll go. It was necessary to sort everything out as quickly as possible. Finish eating first, Minato interrupted his attempt. Nothing will happen today, and You can't do anything to the boy. Kushina, who had been hiding in the kitchen again trying to find some good tea, immediately intervened. I'll just find him a mission. And the more urgent and far away it is, the better. Minato muttered, cutting off a piece of pie and starting to crumble it with his fork as if it were Kiba himself. It looked terrifying. Kakashi caught his breath imperceptibly and stared at his bowl of rice, which he hadn't touched the entire time. His appetite suddenly doubled. He'd been given the go-ahead. He'd been accepted. And they weren't going to finish him off like the younger Inuzuka. Well, maybe life really wasn't as bad as he thought for quite a long time. Chapter 6. He still hadn't been able to find her the previous day. Kakashi was beginning to think Naruto had simply vanished into thin air, having circled the entire village 3 times, visited Ichiraka 6 times, not to mention visited almost every training ground a dozen times. He even stopped by the dango shop, the orphanage, the nursing home, and the nursery. He'd literally gone to every place Naruto could have been, but she was nowhere to be found. Or rather, not quite. She'd been to all these places, but slightly earlier than Kakashi, which meant they'd sometimes only been separated for a few minutes, and even that was enough for him to be unable to find her afterwards. So this morning he was incredibly tense and angry. He'd been up most of the night, replaying the same scene in his head, Naruto on a date with Kiba. Kakashi hadn't imagined anything concrete, but even the mere thought of them together was enough to make his blood boil with rage and his fists clench convulsively. It seemed he'd seriously ruined his bite that night, grinding down his teeth in blind jealousy and anger. Some part of him understood that all this was baseless speculation, and it was unlikely that one date could change anything that had caused Naruto to suddenly and irrevocably fall in love with the Inuzuka. But this part was so small that he didn't even pay it the attention it deserved. Which, in fact, was worth doing, because that way he could get some sleep. Kakashi knew that theoretically he could go to Naruto's place at night. Like any experienced shinobi, she was a light sleeper, so waking her would be no problem, but there were other issues at play. The first and foremost were her parents. Minato and Kushina would hardly have approved of his actions, even though they considered him a potential son-in-law. The second reason was Naruto herself, who also needed sleep. Perhaps he had become overprotective, but he didn't see anything wrong with that, to be honest. And he could deal with his own problems. Although, experience had shown that he couldn't. Otherwise, he wouldn't have spent the entire night in bed, tossing and turning, not to find a more comfortable sleeping position, not to even briefly distract himself from the image in his head of Naruto holding Kiba's hand and smiling sweetly at him. The memory again made Kakashi clench his teeth, causing them to ache with a persistent ache. Wonderful. Now he'd have to see a medic need to have his jaw checked. Not Naruto, but one continuous headache. And this despite the fact that they weren't even in a relationship yet. Not yet. Kakashi? Rin's voice brought him out of his pensive and irritated state. Turning around abruptly, his gaze fell first on her belly, not too big, but already protruding. Yes, she and Obito were expecting a child. He'd somehow forgotten about that, especially considering he hadn't spoken to the Uchiha for about 6 months. And, by extension, with Rin either. Oh, hi. Kakashi mumbled awkwardly, looking up at the girl, who only smiled in response. Long time no see, Rin said, her smile still intact, her kind tones still intact. Obito, who had fallen behind her, was about to arrive, but now he was scurrying behind, lugging large boxes and bags. Yes, very. He didn't want his voice to sound guilty, but that's what it ended up being. Maybe you'd like to come visit? Rin immediately asked, clearly reading the confusion and awkwardness in her friend and former teammate. I'm a little. You can spare half an hour for us, you brainless idiot. Obito grumbled as he approached, breathing heavily and adjusting the box with what Kakashi assumed was a crib and the bags of things in his hands. The Uchiha was right. It was still morning, and no one had arranged dates so early, so it was unlikely he would have caught Naruto out with the Inuzuka. Besides, he hadn't seen Rin and Obito in far too long, which is why his conscience, awakened at such an inopportune moment, was now gnawing at him, demanding that he give his friends at least 10 minutes. Let me help then, Kakashi muttered, deciding not to argue, and reached for the largest bag, the one that looked the heaviest. Obito immediately and happily handed him part of his burden. If you decide to get married anytime soon, I'm telling you right now, don't rush into having children. Pregnant women are terrifying in their demands and anger. Obito whispered, helping his friend adjust the handles of his bag. No, I definitely won't rush into having children, Kakashi assured him, immediately receiving a rather surprised and intrigued look in response. But not about marriage. Obito drawled, surprised, exchanging glances with an equally shocked Rin. Kakashi wisely remained silent, largely unsure how or what to answer. Overall, the prospect of marriage didn't frighten him the way it had 5 years ago, but there were still those endless buts. For example, he needed to explain the situation with Naruto. Oh, Kami, you've found yourself a girlfriend, Rin suddenly cried, far too excited for a pregnant woman. Kakashi somehow confidently thought that in her state, she shouldn't be so nervous. He's got social and emotional skills on par with the mask he wore when he was in A&BU. Kakashi winced at Obito's outburst, but didn't argue. He wouldn't say he was that bad, but yes, interacting with him was clearly not the most pleasant or easy for most people. He hated it when Obito got this close to the truth. Damn that idiot. No, just look at him. He actually found himself a girlfriend. Rin grabbed Obito's arm and practically forced him to turn around to look at Kakashi. No way. He trailed off, staring at Kakashi as if he'd read something from the part of his face that was visible. To be fair, Obito himself was pretty far from being able to easily read social cues and hints. But either marriage had affected him that much, or he had truly matured, but now he looked at Kakashi as if he truly understood everything about him from the look in his eyes alone. Home now! Obito commanded, suddenly as cheerful and energetic as you usually only saw on Guy. They burst into the house too quickly, it seemed to Kakashi. Rin kept throwing him strange, unsettling glances, and Obito flew forward as if he were deliberately strengthening every step with chakra. I'll take the things to the room. Kakashi, give me the bag. I'll make tea for all of us. Kakashi, make yourself comfortable. Rin said the last in the same no-nonsense tone Kushina usually used when she needed something from them, back when the three of them were stupid teenagers who somehow decided they'd seen enough shit in their lives. In general, this was true. They had been through the war, witnessed the liberation of the nine-tailed fox, and their sensei was, and to some extent still is, the fourth Hokage himself. So, in some ways, many would consider their frivolity and self-confidence justified. But that didn't change the fact that, at their core, they were children. Kakashi was distracted from his thoughts by the whistling of the kettle. Rin, with a grace she hadn't lost even with her changed waist and growing belly, danced around the kitchen, preparing tea and snacks. Wash your hands and tell Obito to do the same, please, Rin said softly, concentrating on pouring boiling water into the cups. Kakashi responded with a grunt of agreement, and went to look for Obito. The layout of the house was very similar to Minato-sensei and Kushina's, so Kakashi immediately headed to the second floor, having a rough idea of where to look for his future father. His instincts were right. Obito was indeed standing in the middle of the room, which clearly promised to soon become a nursery, examining the boxes and storage scrolls that took up almost all the space. Trying to see if you've forgotten anything? Kakashi asked, leaning against the doorframe, feeling strangely awkward. They had indeed been apart for quite some time, and now, seeing how wide the gap in their relationship had stretched, Kakashi couldn't help but think that he was largely to blame. I know we've made all the preparations, even if the baby won't be born for months. But it's good to know and reassure ourselves that we truly are prepared for anything. Rin asked. Call me and remind me to wash my hands? Cammy collapsed at the table right after a mission, and she hasn't let me forget it since. Obito grumbled, rolling his eyes kindly as he left the room, leading Kakashi after him. Rin was waiting for them with tea already prepared and sweet snacks laid out on the table. Her fingers absent-mindedly crumbled some cookies as she stared out the window, lost in her own thoughts, but when Kakashi and Obito entered the kitchen, she turned to them with a smile. And for some reason, it was that smile that made Kakashi tense, knowing full well what was coming next. The first few minutes passed in blissful calm, with them exchanging overly general remarks interspersed with awkward silences, but thanks to Rin's efforts, it quickly passed. You didn't think I'd forget about your girlfriend, did you? She asked, looking at Kakashi over her cup. She's not mine. Sorry, your future girlfriend. She interrupted, accompanied by Obito's satisfied chuckle. Kakashi only sighed heavily. I know we've grown apart lately, but you know you can share your worries with us, right? Rin's soft voice sounded soothing, familiar, somehow like home, but Kakashi suddenly longed to hear Naruto speak with a particular intensity, louder and more energetic. He bit the inside of his cheek, looking thoughtfully at his tea, then at Obito and Rin's intertwined hands. Could he confess to them without being judged? Minato and Kushina weren't opposed to his feelings, but Kakashi shook his head. What the hell did it matter? If he missed his chance to be with her, he would never forgive himself. So enduring the disapproval of others seemed a small price to pay. Naruto. He just said her name. As if it explained everything. As if it contained everything Kakashi was now and would eventually be, which was, to some extent, the truth. And as if he were passing some kind of judgment on himself. At first, the kitchen was silent, a little awkward as Rin and Obito exchanged puzzled glances, and then Rin's eyes cleared and she stared at Kakashi. Wait, you mean that? He simply nodded, holding her gaze firmly. The feared condemnation was not there, but surprise was so clearly visible in his dark eyes that Kakashi involuntarily shifted. And it was this that pushed Obito to the realization. You're in love with Sensei's daughter? Sighing heavily, Kakashi only nodded again. The silence that had fallen suddenly fell upon them with the force and weight of an avalanche. It settled heavily on their shoulders, preventing them from breathing or moving at all. You should have known that Jiraiya Sannin's porn books would eventually lead you to this. Obito's phrase, although openly offensive in nature, but spoken in a distrustful voice that had barely contained amusement, allowed Kakashi to relax. Go to hell, Minato-sensei will kill you. Actually, he doesn't mind. Really? Rin exclaimed too happily, and Kakashi, distracted by the squabble with Obito, stared at her with a slight frown in bewilderment. You need a girl with a personality like Naruto, and I'm incredibly glad that Minato-sensei doesn't mind you being together. She even clapped her hands in excitement, which made Kakashi feel embarrassed. And why did he even think he would be judged? So, what's the problem then? Obito asked, smirking. You've finally fallen in love, apparently for the first time in your life. Her parents don't mind, and I think she wouldn't mind trying something with you either. What's wrong? Rin nodded vigorously, looking from her husband to Kakashi, and he couldn't help but let out a pained groan, which caused his friends to laugh. It was as if the ice that had been holding them together melted, and Kakashi couldn't help but notice how his shoulders sagged, releasing the tension that had been holding them together. The problem is, I can't find her anywhere, Kakashi complained, leaning back in his chair more relaxed, rolling his eyes. She's like a ghost now. Everyone talks about her, but you can't see her. Oh? Rin suddenly smiled contentedly. Well, that won't be a problem. Naruto should be here in about half an hour. She wanted to help paint the nursery. So if you stay late, you'll easily meet her, and you can talk. And then, we'll handle the walls ourselves. Ourselves? Obito asked plaintively, hearing the last words, although he had been nodding vigorously up until then. Ourselves, dear? Rin's smile turned devilish. And you can start right now. Kakashi smiled and shook his head. He'd been a complete fool to avoid his friends, but it was a good thing they were much smarter than him.